How's it going, guys? Shizukat's here, and today we have the long-awaited Lynette guide. Now, one thing I'm sure a lot of you are thinking right now is that you're gonna roll for Primrose, and then you're never going to use Lynette again. Now that Square Enix has released Primrose as the latest new character, a lot of people are really excited about the prospect of rolling for her and using her as their main dancer. And while Primrose is definitely a fantastic character, let's not detract from the main focus of this video, which is our original dancer, Lynette. Lynette has a lot of tricks up her sleeve, especially as the game develops. I'm going to be taking you through everything I know about this amazing character in terms of both present content that's available for EN, as well as future content that you won't be able to do right now, but can prepare for down the road. Rest assured, Lynette is going to be a relevant character for a long time, and I'm going to show you exactly what makes her so strong. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you watch my latest upload on buffs and debuffs first, and then come back to this video, as we'll be referencing a lot of information from that video, such as different buff categories, buff stacking, etc. Now let's get right into it. Let's first start by taking a look at Lynette's kit. Lynette's staple ability is her team-wide 20% attack and magic up buff, which lasts 2 to 5 turns based on boost level. This is her bread and butter skill, allowing her to increase the team's overall damage. However, this isn't the only buff she has access to. Upon swapping rows, Lynette gives all front row allies 10% attack and magic up for the rest of the turn. Since these two buffs are in different buff categories, they work towards 2 different 30% caps. Additionally, Lynette also has a skill that grants a single ally 15% attack and magic up, which can stack with her team-wide buff to allow one ally to hit the 30% cap. While this is an option that you can go for, it's typically considered slot inefficient to put both buffs on Lynette at the same time, and also action inefficient for Lynette to use an entire turn buffing just one unit when she can be doing other more impactful things. Let's take a look at her fan options next. From early on, she's able to use a 2-hit single target fan attack, a very simple skill, and outside of that, her only other fan option is Kakuran no Mai at 5-star, a 3-hit single target fan that also inflicts 15% magic defense down for 2 turns. While she's a perfectly usable unit for her buffs as a 4.5 star, having her as a full 5-star unit gives her the tools to play as a buffer and debuffer at the same time. For her fire options, she has some pretty normal looking fire options early on, such as a 1-hit nuke and a 1-hit AoE, but her standout fire skills are her 3-hit random target and her 2-hit AoE, which also inflicts 15% fire defense down for 2 turns. She also has an AoE 20% fire defense down debuff, which can stack with the 15% from her 2-hit AoE to reach the 30% cap. Additionally, Lynette's passive gives both herself and her ally in the same row a 10% bonus to fire damage. Currently, Lynette is the strongest available fire attacker, with a very high magic stat and decent elemental attacking options. Thanks to her skills that inflict fire defense down, as well as her own fan skill that inflicts magic defense down, theoretically she could serve as your fire damage dealer. However, I don't feel that this playstyle necessarily suits Lynette's full potential. Ideally, for a DPS character, you want buffers and debuffers alongside them to increase their damage numbers while they can continually attack. Everything about Lynette's kit pretty much undermines that. She has the best buff and debuff skills available, and she can't take all of those powerful support skills and still have enough room in her kit for dedicated damage skills. Even if she could, such as with an Awakening to Lynette that has a 4th ability slot, the entire kit just isn't action efficient. You would have to use 1 turn on buffs, 1 turn on magic defense down, 1 turn on fire defense down, and then your buffs and debuffs are constantly running out, so you have to reapply them instead of using those turns on pure damage. There's just no room for DPS with this crammed schedule full of other great options. Additionally, this DPS playstyle would prevent Lynette from using her powerful swap passive to give all of your other allies extra offensive stats. Rather, Lynette's prime role is as a pure support character, especially in fire compositions. In order to understand the full context that allows Lynette to fit into these compositions, we first need to look at a couple other units that will come out down the line. So first, let's take a look at Mulu. For all intents and purposes, Mulu is Megumin from Konosuba. She's a small, loud, flamboyant mage with big nukes, and they're both even voiced by Rie Takahashi. Mulu's most noteworthy skill is her 3-hit fire random target, which inflicts 2 turns of 15% fire defense down per hit, basically the same way Sophia inflicts ice defense down. This is the perfect skill to pair with Lynette's 15% fire defense down from her AoE, as the potencies will add up to hit the 30% cap, and since Mulu's skill applies 2 turns of debuff per hit, it will be adding a massive 6 turns to the debuff counter on top of the 2 turns applied by Lynette, assuming all of the hits are hitting the same target. This allows you to maintain the fire defense down for several turns in a row without having to worry about using up actions to reapply them. One of Mulu's other fantastic assets is her passive that gives her action priority when using 3 BP. This makes her an insane initiator, as she can always guarantee the first action over the opponent. Between the Tressa and Heathcote overviews that I've previously posted on the channel, I've talked about how priority is best used for initiators with multi-hit attacks as opposed to nukers. Mulu does have impressive nukes on her kit, with a 260 power fire nuke backed up further by her Scholar passive that gives her 30% fire damage up. However, in a sense, Mulu can be seen as yet another support unit alongside Lynette, paving the way for an even greater fire unit. And I'm of course talking about our boy Cyrus. Cyrus's kit is not complicated. He can use fire, ice, and lightning magic, and he do the big damage. Having Lynette and Mulu help set him up to do massive damage is what makes these three an extremely fearsome fire trio. Now, it's not to say that Mulu's damage isn't also impressive, as she can do really big fire damage herself. In this particular composition, Mulu would serve as a secondary DPS in a similar way Sophia is to Cyrus in ice compositions, while Lynette offers buffs and debuffs and serves as a pure support role. Now back to talking about Lynette. We've talked a lot about how Lynette's utility options are so powerful that it kind of forces her out of the DPS role, both inside and outside of fire compositions. Next, let's jump to one particular item that JP players associate with Lynette to the point that it's pretty much part of her identity as a character. The Bravely Fan, nicknamed as such because it became available as part of the Bravely Default collab, is a weapon that doesn't offer too much in terms of actual offensive stats. At its most powerful form, it's a level 50 weapon with 190 attack, 258 magic, and 32 speed, which are currently already available in English. However, what makes this fan so powerful is its passive that increases all buff durations casted by the holder by +1 turn. It's worth noting that this passive doesn't stack if the unit in question already has the buff extension passive, such as Primrose. Having this weapon equipped means that Lynette's team-wide attack and magic buff that normally lasts 2 to 5 turns now lasts 3 to 6, which is indeed powerful, but isn't as crazy as the other part of Lynette's kit that benefits from this passive, which is Lynette's passive. That's right, the Bravely Fan works with her swapping passive as well, allowing her to give 2 turns of 10% attack and magic up every time she swaps rows, instead of just 1 turn. Because of how buff stacking works in this game, this is an extremely effective way to extend allies' passive attack buffs, such as Fior or Barad, who would normally only last 3 turns apiece, and can now last basically forever if you plan your moves properly. The Bravely Fan doesn't only serve the purpose of extending the swap buff though, as it also comes with the secondary benefit of giving Lynette and the ally in her row more flexibility on how often they swap, since normally Lynette would be forced to swap rows every single turn if she wanted to keep the buff up 100% of the time. Eventually, when special skills get added to the game, Lynette becomes an absolute monster. Due to buffs from special skills being on their own separate multiplier from regular skills, and ignoring their 30% cap, this allows Lynette to buff to 3 separate categories at the same time, resulting in a massive power spike across your team. Looking at her special skill at level 1, it gives all allies 10% attack, magic, and speed up for 2 turns, and then scales all the way up to 20% for 3 turns at level 10. Add in the Bravely Fan, and these skills can last for 3 or even 4 turns instead. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, and have been wondering, what is the big deal about saving an Awakening Stone for Lynette's level 10 special? So in order to understand exactly how important this is, we need to first talk about the mechanics of special skills in the first place. A character's special is not available at the start of battle, and is instead charged by spending BP. The amount of BP required to fully charge a special is based on 2 factors: the level of the special, and whether or not it's attack-based or buff-based. For an attack-based special such as Primrose, you need 6 BP to charge it at level 1, and can charge it at as low as 4 BP starting at level 8. For buff-based specials like Lynette, you need 4 BP to charge it, which goes down to 3 BP at level 10. 1 Awakening Stone is required to bring a special from level 9 to 10, with the level ups before that requiring a completely different resource that will be introduced alongside special skills. The difference between needing 4 BP and 3 BP is absolutely massive. 4 BP means that Lynette cannot cast her special until at least turn 4, unless an ally such as Tressa is feeding her extra BP, in which case she can cast it as early as turn 3 instead. Meanwhile, requiring only 3 BP means that as long as Lynette is at least level 90 and has both of her +1 BP nodes unlocked, she can activate her special skill as early as turn 2, which is absolutely insane. A common play for extremely fast fights is to have Lynette swap from the back row turn 1, casting a max boosted 20% attack and magic buff on the whole front row, while simultaneously applying her passive buff for 2 turns. Then, immediately follow it up with her special on turn 2. Thanks to her extremely high natural speed, this allows Lynette to get all of her buffs on all of her allies before they can make any of their moves as well, which is exactly what you want. Speaking of formations, let's take a look at some positioning choices that we can make with Lynette to maximize her usability. The first important thing to know is where you want Lynette to start the fight, and this depends on what you plan to do in that row on turn 1, which in turn depends on how difficult the fight is. For quick and easy fights that you will expect to end on turn 1 or 2, I recommend having Lynette positioned in the back row to start. This allows her to swap to the front row at the start of turn 1 and apply her 20% skill and 10% passive buffs immediately, which is basically the scenario that we just looked at. If it goes to a turn 2, you have a few options depending on the damage type you're using. If you're using a physical composition, you can swap Lynette with a character such as Viola or Kless to apply defense down. If you're on a magic-based comp, Lynette can apply magic defense down herself, or if you have Viola, you can swap her back for Viola to use anti-guard. This setup only really utilizes 3 attackers plus Lynette plus a possible 5th unit, so the other 3 slots can be used for passive buffs or debuffs such as Sigrid, Laura, or Barad. Once Lynette's special skill comes out, instead of swapping her with a back row unit, you can just use her special instead, assuming you have it at level 10. If you have a fight where you don't even think you'll need Lynette's 20% buff and can just mop up enemies without it, you can start with Lynette in the front row instead, immediately swapping her to the back row for an attacker, applying just the 10% passive buff to the front row. In this scenario, you're going to want to position Lynette in the same row as your fastest attacker, allowing them to move to the front row as the first action of the turn and apply Lynette's passive. Compared to the last setup, this one uses 4 attackers plus Lynette, again leaving 3 slots for passive buffs or debuffs. For longer, more difficult fights where you expect you'll need healing, I would also consider having Lynette start in the front row, and turn 1 swap with, for example, Teo, so he can cast AoE regen on the front line on top of Lynette getting her passive buff off. This brings us to our next point. Who do we want to pair with Lynette? This also depends on the situation, so let's take a look at some of my favorite ways to pair up Lynette. The first thing that I don't want to do is pair Lynette with a dedicated attacking unit. I want that attacker to be doing their thing every single turn, and swapping around with Lynette a bunch is the last thing that I want. Ideally, Lynette is paired with a utility unit that doesn't need to be acting every single turn in order to be useful. A couple examples of this are a debuff unit such as Viola, or a regen caster such as Teo. Either of these units can cast their abilities with BP to extend their durations, allowing them to move much more freely in between casts. As far as accessories go, this too depends on who Lynette is paired with. For compositions where I can pair her with my team's regen caster, Lynette can never be the recipient of that regen skill due to her always being in the back row whenever it gets cast. And for that reason, you would want to equip her with beastly scarves to keep her healthy. She will be getting some natural regen in the back row, but considering she's going to want to be moving forward and backward, just the back row regen is not going to be enough, as she is going to have to spend some turns in the front row if you want to continue using her abilities. All in all, Lynette is a unit that will only shine brighter as the game progresses. I'm sure a lot of you just want to make direct comparisons between Lynette and Primrose since the both of them are dancers, but it's just not that simple. If you want a more in-depth look at Primrose, my Primrose overview is actually simultaneously uploaded on the channel alongside this video, so go ahead and check that one out. Thanks for watching everyone, and until next time, which is probably going to be right after this video, this has been Shizukats. See ya!